Good morning, America, and our 51st state, Canada. Welcome aboard. It's Friday, February 28th, 2025, and this is the DMZ America podcast. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
And coming to you from the right, I'm Scott Stantis, and let us not forget the 52nd state of Greenland, the 53rd state of Panama, and the 54th state of Gaza. So, yeah.
Good point. And I'm for one looking forward to attending the dedication ceremony of the giant gold Nebuchadnezzar statue of Trump that
Donald
will be
Trump, yeah.
at Trump Gaza. If you don't know what Scott and I are talking about, there's a ridiculous AI generated video that Trump shared. I imagine he didn't have it commissioned, but he shared on his feed.
Yeah, and he's positioning himself to make gobs more money from all these other things that are happening. It's really shameless, but that's where we are today.
Shameless is the Trump way.
It's not just the Trump way, Ted.
It's the American way.
It's the American way now, because diving right in, we have talked about this and touched on it several times in this podcast, and that is Ted and I, since 2019, have said that Joe Biden was addled and suffering from dementia. He had all the signs. We said it without glee. We weren't like being assholes about it. We weren't, oh, look at the old guy. But every time you and I wrote about it, every time we talked about it, every time we cartooned about it, you and I caught a rash of shit. Well, for 4 years during that administration. Don't forget, we were hearing from our Democratic friends, and I know you did too, Ted, that Joe Biden wasn't just not addled. He was possibly, and I'm not making this up, folks, this is a quote from many of our Democratic, statist Democratic friends, Joe Biden was probably the greatest president of the 20th century.
Some people even said ever.
Yeah, because Abe Lincoln.
Better than George Washington.
What did he do?
Better than Abe Lincoln.
What did he do? Nothing. Nothing like
do?
Joe Biden, who, could be president and still be demented. No, and so this is going to serve as sort of a bit of a therapy session for Ted and I, because we have some trauma from those 4 years, because the whiplash, the backlash, the response, the hate, the venom directed. Ted got it more than I did, because Ted, I think people still can perceive as a liberal, and in their minds, that means Democratic mouthpiece. And so anytime Ted steps out of that lane, they go bananas. It's like myself. I worked on both of Reagan's campaigns. I've worked on Republican politics. I have a degree from the California Republican Party Campaign Management College. But if I ever, when in the last few years, if I go outside of the Republican lane, I get blasted, and I mean blasted. But nothing got us more hate, more vitriol, more venom than when Ted and I had the temerity to point out that, given our own family experiences, we could watch Joe Biden, we could listen to Joe Biden and say, this man is sliding into dementia. He was having the dementia shuffle. And when we had the temerity to point this out, we were shouted at vigorously and without any kind of constraints. And we're here now. Ted, you want to take it from here? The latest, there's a book coming out.
There is a book coming out. Jake Tapper, who, full transparency, Scott and I both know. And he's a friend of political cartooning and political cartoonists. He's a very nice man. He's my neighbor here in New York. And Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson of Axios, who I'm not familiar with, are co-writing an upcoming book, comes out May 20th, called Original Sin: President Biden's Decline, Its Cover-Up, and His Disastrous Choice to Run Again. This book supposedly exposes an alleged cover-up of Biden's serious decline based on over 200 interviews with Biden administration and Democratic Party insiders. The book highlights how Biden's team concealed his diminishing faculties a narrative that Democrats are now grappling with following the post-2024 election loss. Top figures like Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer, who were either had nothing to say or just outright lied about it, are now implicated as likely aware of the truth, per sources at the Wall Street Journal and others. Barack Obama is now reported to have suspected Biden's condition. The party, however, refused to admit any of this. Tapper, who previously downplayed concerns, now is framing the Biden's reelection campaign as narcissistic and reckless. And so now now that it doesn't matter and that it's too late to think about it, Democrats are distancing themselves from the cover-up narrative that they once rejected. So they're just saving their own asses. And
I knew all the time, which is okay. Ted has said this and he's right. You're either stupid or you're corrupt. What Ted just described, what's going to be described in this book, and as Ted said, we both know Jake, we both like him, but this is repulsive, and I'll tell you why. Having grown up in a newsroom where my dad ran television newsrooms across the country, where I, at the age of 18, walked into my first newspaper newsroom and fell in love with the industry and fell in love with that. I know the conversations newsroom have, and when their reporter or reporters who covered the White House would come and talk to them, they knew this was a coup d'etat, Ted, and these are unelected people who were running the Oval Office because this guy, Joe Biden, could not. And that to me is criminal. Now I'm going to full disclosure here. I was listening to you were doing your center clip, which is a thing Ted and I do. It's their mini podcasts. And you mentioned there should be congressional hearings. I don't call for those very often because, well, I think they're silly, a lot of them. But we need to find out precisely what happened. This is a call. I know Ted joins me. This is a full-throated call for the Senate and the House to have hearings as to what exactly happened. Now, given the players in the House and the Senate,
in this case, what did the president not know?
No.
And when did he not know it?
Exactly. I mean, this is so criminal and so despicable, in my view, and now these guys coming out saying, oh, we're writing books. We knew it all the time. Well, then why in the name of God did you yell at people like Ted and I who were trying to say,
instead of inviting us on your show?
Well, not even doing that. For me, were you invited on the show?
Alone. No, they didn't invite us. No, we have been, to the extent that we've either been ignored or to the extent that we've been engaged, we have been privately and publicly shamed, ridiculed, insulted, accused of being ageist,
yes,
who the fuck are we to have to assess these things? Where are you a gerontologist? How are you an expert? Have you personally examined the president? Blah blah blah. I mean, the thing is, we could spend this entire podcast just talking about all the evidence that Biden was demented. The point is, we don't have to now, because now we're going to have this book come out, and we have other people who are starting to come out inside the Democratic hierarchy who were present. And like you said, Scott, everyone knew. They were either, well, they knew. I mean, I'm giving them credit for, I'm going to say they weren't stupid. They were just corrupt. And I mean, and the thing is, I guess they justified this to themselves. Maybe some of them just said, well, we don't care. We just want what we want. We want to be in power, and this is the guy, and we've put him in. I bet some of them justified it to themselves by saying Trump is so bad, and if it wasn't Biden, it would be Trump in the 2020 election. Of course, that necessarily didn't need to be true. I think there's a strong chance. I mean, the idea that, Trump always says only I can fix it. Biden kind of made the same argument in 2020. Only I can beat Trump. That wasn't true. And there were any number of other Democrats who I would not say were high quality candidates, but were at least equal on par to Joe Biden in their ability to get votes. I don't think Cory Booker or Amy Klobuchar or Pete Buttigieg are masterful politicians, but they're all as good as Biden.
Well, especially at that point. But Biden was blessed, and I hate to put it this way, with the pandemic, because then he did not have to have rallies. He didn't have to go and have face-to-face interviews. They didn't have access. But Ted, here are the other players in this cover-up, and that's the press corps. Now, I've told you this story before. I don't think I've ever said it on our podcast before, but I'll mention it briefly. I was on staff with the Chicago Tribune, went to Washington, D.C. for some meetings. And one of the things I was doing was sitting in on the press pool. And this was during the Obama administration. And our reporter, the Chicago Tribune reporter, invited me to sit in on that. And I did. And it was interesting. And I was going to go back to where the press worked in the West Wing and see that space. And because I'd never seen it before, and I still haven't, for this very reason. Our reporter for the Tribune asked a very mild, Ted, I can't recall the exact verbiage, but this was as mild a question as you could possibly ask, because he was getting hammered for Benghazi. Not Benghazi. Benghazi, I think it was. But he was being hammered for a subject that they wanted, and she gave them like a question she had asked. Who
was?
This is our reporter from the Chicago Tribune.
Was asking who?
The press secretary at the time.
For Obama.
For Obama's press secretary. And she asked the question, and it was, like I said, innocuous, innocent. It deflected the line of questioning he was getting. And then, was it Benghazi? I'm trying to remember exactly what it was, but anyway, it was one of those issues that, goes up and down, but it seems hot at the moment. Regardless, she asked this question, deflected and redirected the line of questioning for the press secretary. We're done. And she said, Scott, come out. Can you come with me? And we went outside, and I was pretty sure that the reporters weren't working outside. But she said, I can't take you back there. They're really pissed at me. I go, what do you mean? What happened? And she explained that she had asked this question without passing it through the press office first before the press conference.
Oh,
are you with me so far?
I'm with you.
And so she couldn't even bring a guest into, and you know who was pissed at her? Not just the press office for the White House.
Oh, I bet I know what you're going to say.
But the reporters were pissed at her for pissing off the press office. And I just was standing there. I thought she was either kidding or exaggerating. She was not. I still, to this day, have never seen the press offices at the White House, because she said, well, hey, it was great seeing you. The exit's that way. And which was kind of cool, because you're walking across the grounds of the White House, which is, you look over your shoulder and say, well, shit.
Look at me. Look at where I am.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. Wow. Yeah. A Stantis finally made it to the White House.
The first and last time.
Actually, my dad was at a reception at the White House years before. He reminded me.
Well, you have kids. It could happen for them.
It could. Well, I'm thinking President Hugo Stantis, my grandson, is what I'm thinking.
I think so.
Yeah. Start now. Get used to it now.
He's gonna have to get all the orange schmutz off the walls, though.
God, could you imagine what's on the phone? You told that story last time about the dog turd on the phone, like on the phone. There's all this orange crap just dripping off of it.
And Biden's drool, all caked up and crusted on.
Thank God, dementia is not contagious. But my long story, short point, the press corps is just as and I know you probably already knew this, Ted, that the press corps was just as incestuous as you would imagine it to be. Look at what Trump is doing now. He's not allowing AP because AP refuses to call it the Gulf of America. Mm-hmm. And so he's blocking them out, and they're going to start blocking other outlets. If they had any balls at all, if they really were the bulwark of the people and democracy dies in darkness and all the other bullshittery they spew, because they clearly don't believe it, Ted, wouldn't it be great if with the AP, if all of the news organizations there in mass stood up and said, okay, we're not going to cover you. And they literally did not, they walked out, not a word about Donald Trump in the New York Times, not a word about Donald Trump in CNN, not a word about Donald Trump on NPR. I mean, could you imagine? He'd go nuts.
Yeah.
He'd go bananas.
Mm-hmm.
He'd get all the attention he wanted from, Newsmax, but that's not quite the same market, and it doesn't play into his ego. But they won't do it. They would never, given the story I just told you, they would never, ever do that, because that would imperil their position as a reporter covering the White House, which is awesome.
Well, they're not really reporters. They're not really covering the White House. They're stenographers. They're lickspittles of the establishment. I mean, you're not a reporter if you submit your questions to your interview subject in advance. You're just not.
Right. Which is curious, because
how are you better than a reporter for Izvestia or TASS during the Soviet period? You're not. You're exactly the same.
That is
I guarantee you they submitted their questions in advance.
Oh yes. They went through the Bureau of Question Asking. People's Bureau of Question Asking.
Benevolent Bureau. Yes.
So now I think truly hearings are called for. This is one of those few times that I admit that you have to say and call for hearings. However, the current cast of characters in both the House and the Senate, we know what this would devolve into. It would be the Republicans going, they wanted to do this and they wanted to vaccinate your dogs, which you're kind of going, what? And on the left, the Democrats would say, he was the greatest president we ever had.
How dare you?
It was.
Well, I think it's like, I don't know if Republicans, look, obviously the Republicans they control the House of Representatives. That's where investigations begin. It seems to me like the House Oversight Committee under James Comer has a duty here to look into this, and they have a political interest in it. Obviously, it would shame the Democrats, and it would make them look as terrible as they deserve to look. So it's obviously a big opportunity for them. I suspect that there would be a couple of reasons not to do it. And I'm not sure how to rank them, but I would say the two main ones would be, it's going to distract from the current president's agenda. And more to the point, the current president is exactly the same age that Biden was when he assumed office, and is also, he's not as far gone as Biden was, obviously. But, he's not the same as he used to be either. And so I can see them thinking, okay, well, if in a year or two we find ourselves in the same exact boat, we don't want to call attention to this phenomenon of our gerontocracy, appointing these really old, doddering idiots to the White House.
Well, did you see the press conference yesterday with press back and forth with President Trump? And he said that he doesn't remember calling Zelensky a dictator.
He remembers.
But what if he doesn't? Yeah, well, of course. Donald Trump lying? That's not possible.
Obviously. Yeah.
That's out of character for him.
No, first time for everything, though. Part of the dementia starting to set in.
But I do think if you listen to him speak, you can see there's definitely some trappings there. And people will ask, well, why does this matter? You're just kind of doing the same thing that the guys who are coming out with books and the interviews are saying, why mention it now?
That's not what this is about at all.
That's not what this is about, because two things happened. First of all, I come back to the coup d'etat. That happened. That was a thing that happened in the United States. It was, his Liz Cheney. What's his name? I can't remember Biden's wife's first name.
Jill.
Jill Biden is this century's Edith Wilson. Look it up, kids. But two, it's Biden's fault that we have Trump too.
True.
This is their fault. Any Democrat who supported this asshole, any Democrat who turned a blind eye to a man who was clearly not able to perform as president, who should not have run for re-election, and supported
they took a chance, right? They knew that, like, when they rolled the dice on Biden for re-election, man, who knows what's going to happen, right? And obviously, and here's the thing, the way I look at it is, you go to the casino and you place your bet. If you lose, you got to pay. Okay, well, they placed their bet, and it came up snake eyes, right? At the debate, there was no longer any denying it, although the truth is there was never any denying it for 4 years. but there was
there
no
was,
denying it, because the big reveal there was that most people don't watch the news. So for the first time, they turned into the debate and they were like, oh, that's our president, the guy that we haven't paid attention to for 4 years. Oh, shit. And that's what happened, right? So because the viewership is just, tens of millions, it's super high. So it's like a sporting event, right? It's the sporting event it's the Super Bowl of politics, is a presidential debate. So, he came out, he fucked up. And now, I'm sorry, Democrats, you got to pay, right? Like Nancy Pelosi, Schumer, all you, Obama, all you people, you have to be shamed. You have to be ridiculed. You have to pay. Like, you gambled and you lost. And when you lose, you got to pay. And that's what bugs me, is it seems like they're not likely to pay. And and also the media. I mean, look, I think as media heads go, Jake Tapper's more honest than most. I mean, and he's at least willing to admit it after the fact. Okay, and make some money doing it. But I mean, he worked the grift both sides, right? He worked the grift as part of the cover up. Like, if he had repeatedly held the administration's feet to the fire over the mental state of the president for the last 4 years, he would have been called on the carpet or maybe even fired. So he towed the line, and now he's like, now that it's safe, he's able to make some money on the other side. God bless him. Good for him. I wish I was as smart and cynical as he is. But I mean, really, I just don't know how to roll that way. My mom didn't raise me right. But it's like, but really, truly, I mean, what this tells us is it showcases the fact that the media can't be counted on to do their jobs.
Right.
So, and if it's not about this, it's going to be about something else. And so, like, that's a problem. We have, the fourth estate, the watchdog of democracy, is asleep and neutered. And so, what good are they? And then,
and they're dying, and maybe they deserve to, because if this is the kind of coverage we can expect, if this is the kind of objective reporting, this is their idea of objective reporting, well, then there's something very, very wrong in the world of journalism, because Jake Tapper knew. The newsroom at CNN,
they all knew
that this guy was addled.
Rachel Maddow knew.
Yeah, they had to have, because they have newsrooms, and
Chris
that
Hayes
was the discussion.
Knew.
I mean, I've told you stories.
Not to mention, also, it's not even the newsroom discussion. They all have friends at the White House. They have friends in the Democratic hierarchy. Don't tell me my old buddy Donna Brazil didn't know. Basically, they all knew, and it was like a dirty secret, and nobody wanted to be look, I get it. Like, I'll just choose James Carville randomly. If James Carville had come out and been like the Raging Cajun, like, the president's, he's shot, he's done, like, well, his phone would have never rung again, right? I mean, that would have been the end of him. As
he was one of the few ones that, I think Carville, wasn't he one of the few ones that actually did mention this? I mean,
not really. Not until after it was too late.
Yeah, everyone can say afterwards, but
and also stuff he didn't say anything about Kamala Harris being a terrible candidate. He said he was worried, but he didn't think she was going to win.
None of the Democrats that I talked to ever said, and you and I have had friends and colleagues, say that Kamala
I invited
Harris,
several of them to come on today. Nobody.
Did you?
Yeah. They're not answering my texts,
Many of them said Kamala Harris was the best possible candidate and ran a perfect campaign. That's a quote.
Yeah.
Neither of those is true. Okay.
And these are two separate. They're two. I mean, they're related issues. The Kamala Harris issue and the Biden issue are obviously there. No Biden senility, no Kamala Harris candidacy.
Right, but it came from the same. It came from the same people.
Too.
It came from the same people, by the way.
With Kamala Harris, the cover up was trying to cover up that she was a bird brain, and just keep her out of the public eye. But it's not really a scandal, right? It's basically like, our candidate's an imbecile, and we just don't want anyone to know. Is somehow not as bad as, our candidate is literally in danger of swallowing his own tongue. and he could start a nuclear war. That's a problem. The sitting president of the United States was not here. He didn't give any press conferences. He didn't have any unvetted interviews. The interviews that he had, as you pointed out, were scripted. He had the questions and the face of the reporter that he was going to call on, like Scott Standish, Chicago Tribune, and then it's like he sees the question that he's going to be asked. He's been prepped to answer it, and even so, he couldn't do it most of the time. And the media constantly covered up. Scott, I don't think I've mentioned this to you, but back in 2020, it was during when President Biden was running. He was running from his basement. He conducted a medical COVID open town hall from his basement. CNN moderated it. It was Anderson Cooper was the moderator, and he was repeatedly asked softball questions that were provided from the audience to Anderson Cooper. I don't know if they were provided to Biden in advance. I assume they were.
I'm sure they were.
Maybe they weren't. But anyway, the point is they were super easy questions. And over and more than one occasion, Biden he couldn't answer the question. He clearly didn't remember while he was talking what the question was. He was, and again, these were questions that really helped him, right? Should have helped him look better than Trump. Who had been like, Scott Standish, how does it feel to be the best looking, most talented cartoonist of them all? And then it's like you forget completely and you start talking about like your favorite kind of cactus. And like,
I like cheese.
And so that's what he did. Anyway, the point is, there were excerpts. The whole town hall was broken down into bits and pieces on the CNN website. The next day I go to look for the relevant sections where he ran off at the mouth to post to social media.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that
doesn't surprise me.
And that kind of thing happened over and over again.
Yeah. No, I remember you talking about things like that. And that's, again, the press had the obligation to tell us, but because it's such an
we should give credit where it's due. The Republican press, the right-wing press, Fox News, and even they didn't really do that much.
No, they really didn't. And when they did talk about it, it was always with a chortle and a sneer. And that's not how you cover this kind of story, because it is tragic. Because like I mentioned earlier, Ted and I have dealt with family members, as I'm sure most of the people listening and watching right now, we've had dealt with a family member who's dealt with dementia. It's tough.
Sure.
It's difficult. So we weren't saying it, but the right-wing press was like chortling about it.
To the extent that they talked about it at all. But they did talk about it a little bit.
They did a little bit.
And it was kind of like, oh, Joe, look at him. He's falling up the stairs onto Air Force One. He doesn't remember where he is. He's talking to dead people. Remember when he called out for the woman whose funeral he had attended. I mean,
wouldn't that be awesome if that person showed up? Think about it, Ted. I mean, it's a 1 in a million shot, but
is it really?
Joe Biden can raise the dead.
Well, I might vote for someone like that.
But how many times did we hear during the course of those 4 years that behind closed doors, Joe Biden has his shit together, that he is actually very conversant and so on. And now the reports are coming out that even at very small fundraisers, he had to have a teleprompter to say, hello, how are you? That's how far gone this guy is. I mean, have we heard from him since?
No. And well, I guess he did. I did see a couple of days ago, there was some kind of, I don't know if it was a video or a photo originally. I just saw the photo of him chit-chatting, hobnobbing with an Amtrak employee on the line between Wilmington, Delaware and Washington that he was famous for taking often. And I mean, he's around a little bit, but I mean, look, as tragic as it is, I got to say, there's a higher, much bigger issue than one old man starting to lose it. And that issue is he was the president of the United States. And like, it's unconscionable that such an important job was allowed to stay in this man's hands ostensibly, A, And B, if the fallback is, don't worry, he's got all the best and brightest people behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's not our system. We don't
Right.
we don't tell school children we elect a cabal of hidden technocrats behind the scenes to run the president, while some empty suit is pretending to play the job on TV. That's not our. If we want to have that system, we can do that, but that's not our system. We don't vote for that. So it's a lie. It's fraud, and it's it belies democracy. And it also, even if you don't care about that, if you're a Democrat, this has completely destroyed the Democratic Party brand for the foreseeable future.
Oh gosh, yeah.
What's the brand? The brand is, unlike the Republicans and Trump, who lie like the day is long, we tell you the truth. Not so much, right? I mean, how can they possibly say they're any better than Donald Trump? Oh, Trump lies more. Trump lies about what he said about Zelensky. It takes 50,000 Trump lies to add up to a big blockbuster lie like this thing about about Biden being senile. That's the mother of all lies. There are no lies that come close to that. It's insane.
And that's another aspect of the story. And then we're going to tie things up here.
Yep.
But is that now I'm having a senior moment. See, we should talk about that sometime.
Well, maybe you shouldn't be president.
I'm not going to be. I can promise you I will not run. If nominated, I will not run. If elected, I will not serve. But with the other part of the story that is being widely ignored is the fact that where was I going with this? Was not just the press lied but that the Democrats, many Democrats, and you've seen the polls on this, are really profoundly, significantly pissed off at the Democratic Party for lying to them about Joe Biden. They're very pissed off at the press. That's why what's happening at the Washington Post, people aren't that pissed off there, because the people who were paying attention said, you guys didn't cover that. Fuck you. We're done. So, now that the editorial page is going to write about nothing but personal freedoms in free markets, like, they weren't doing that.
There's apparently been more details on that. The departed opinion editor, he said, so he quit because the owner, right, Jeff Bezos, the world's richest man, maybe tied with Elon Musk, said that from now on, the Washington Post will only cover the issues of personal freedom and capitalism, right, on the front, or free markets, right. I should say, on the free front, markets, on the front, in the opinion section. Bezos elaborated and said, of course, we'll cover other things. We will just no longer have space for anything that opposes personal freedoms and free markets. And I'm like, I think you would have to search very hard to find a single sentence that's ever appeared in the Washington Post that opposes free markets or personal freedom.
Well, and is that code for Donald Trump? We have to believe so, because Amazon has multi-billion-dollar contracts with and pending with the federal government. Mm-hmm. You notice that Bezos, Musk is not really threatening those yet. And I suspect that this move will allow Amazon to get those contracts, because in 2019, 2018, they were up for a multi-billion-dollar cloud contract with the federal government. And because of, democracy dies in darkness of the Washington Post, the administration gave it to, I believe it was Microsoft, not to Amazon. Bezos doesn't want a repeat of that, because that was a lot of money. Those fifth yachts don't come cheap.
Yeah, that's true, especially the kind that he likes.
Oh my God, he loves them. Oh my God, these things are just monstrosities.
Yeah, I'm not sure I really understand from the billionaire mindset what the point of that is. I mean, obviously, look, they're busy people. They don't spend much time on it. They need an incredible staff 365 days a year to maintain them. I mean, basically it's like having your own floating hotel /
And
party.
you can afford it. And I think it just shows when you floated into cons to see the film there, or when you take it into wherever, it makes you, your yacht dwarfs everybody else's. That's the only thing it is. And he's a little guy, so I suspect there's a lot to be said for the little man syndrome when it comes to Jeff Bezos.
Well, but do you feel smaller when you're nestled in larger fake bosoms?
Some guys probably like that. That's going back to the womb, and some guys, that's a kink that I can't address, but I suspect it exists because virtually all of them do.
That's true. That's true.
Different podcast.
Indeed. Is it really?
We can talk about that. But
seriously, I mean, so what do you think the odds are that Republicans are going to make any hay out of this? And
they're going to have hearings, but it's going to devolve.
You think there will be?
Yeah. I suspect one or both houses will.
After the book comes out, right?
I think, there's just more and more.
Because the book is going to make some news.
I think it will, but I suspect that there is just rumblings, and I want to know. I mean, I think there's a right to know, but I also predict that it will devolve into all the usual bullshittery that we have come to expect from the profiles and pudding that is the House and the Senate of the United States.
Indeed.
Ted, do you think that that will happen?
I don't know. I mean, I think odds are less than 50% that we'll ever have any hearings. It's not zero, but I mean, I'd give it like a 25% chance. Like when the book comes out, if it gets a lot of publicity, if it's well written, if it sells well, it's a lot of ifs. And if it's serialized, for example, in like major newspapers, I could see there being Republicans being like, we could have some hearings. Maybe.
What's a newspaper, Ted? I'm
right.
Sorry, you lost me on that one.
Right.
Anyway, well, let's leave it there. Ted, where can we see all things Ted Rollian?
Oh, please check both Scott and I out at gocomics.com. In my case, /Ted Roll. In Scott's case, /Scott Stantis. You can go to Center Clip, where you can also see, or more to the point, you can hear Scott and I separately but equally pontificating about this and that in very short podcasts, mini podcasts as Scott described them. You go to my website, rall.com, RALL.com, which I will be in about probably 2 months or 3 months or so dropping a new book, which Scott has read. And,
it's excellent. It's worth a read.
Thank you.
I disagree with every page of it.
Scott? Anything before I bring us out with the outro?
You can go to chicagotribune.com, see the work I do for them. Go to Dallas News for the work I do for the Dallas Morning News, and go to smirkonish.com. And you can even subscribe for free to Michael Smirkonish's newsletter, daily newsletter. He has a poll. It's quite vibrant. I'm glad I'm a part of it. It really is. Excellent. So there you go.
All right. Thanks so much, Scott. As always, a pleasure. Thanks everyone for listening to us here and watching us here on the DMZ America podcast. We always drop the video first, then the audio goes up a little bit later. So just be aware of that, and subscribe to us everywhere where you get podcasts, and it'll just pop up on your device. Here comes the outro.
Go see this stuff.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.